Have you ever faced a problem so big you thought nothing could overcome it? Imagine then an army marching with elephants, huge, unstoppable, and coming to destroy the holiest place on earth. That's exactly what happened when Abraha and his army set out to demolish the Kaaba. But instead of fear leading to despair, Allah revealed a timeless truth, that no force, no matter how powerful, can overpower His protection. Today, we're diving into that miracle and what it means for your life when struggles feel like giant elephants blocking your way. In the vast expanse of ancient Yemen, where the echoes of Ethiopian rule still lingered, a tale of power, faith, and divine intervention was about to unfold. This is the story of Abraha, the righteous general who would challenge the sacred house of Mecca, and how his noble intentions would lead to one of history's most extraordinary demonstrations of divine power. The story begins with Iriad, the Ethiopian governor of Najashi in Yemen. Though officially a governor under the Najashi's rule, in Yemen he was regarded as a king, but Iriad was a man consumed by tyranny and oppression. He seized people's rights, oppressed the innocent, and even mistreated his African soldiers who had served faithfully under Ethiopian command. Watching this injustice unfold was Abraha, a man of noble character and strong moral conviction. Historical accounts describe him as someone who could not bear to witness such oppression. When Abraha counseled Iriad to change his ways, the tyrant refused to listen. What happened next would reshape the political landscape of the Arabian Peninsula forever. Abraha made a fateful decision. He rallied the African soldiers who shared his disgust with Iriad's tyrannical rule, calling them to rebellion. Soon, two Ethiopian armies faced each other across the Yemen desert, both serving the same distant king, yet divided by principles of justice and oppression. Before the battle commenced, Abraha sent a letter to Iriad with a proposal born of strategic wisdom. "O Iriad," the letter read, "rather than see all of Najashi's African forces perish in this conflict, rather than watch Yemen return to chaos through our mutual destruction, let us settle this matter between ourselves. Let us duel, one against one. Whoever emerges victorious shall lead." Historical records describe Iriad as a man of imposing physical strength and exceptional combat prowess. Confident in his abilities and aware of Abraha's lesser martial skills, like a black belt facing a red belt in combat arts, Iriad accepted the challenge. The two men faced each other in single combat that would determine the fate of Yemen. The duel was brutal. In the heat of battle, Iriad's blade found its mark, severing Abraha's nose in a devastating blow. In Arabic, one whose nose has been cut is called Asram, and from that day forward, Abraha would bear the title Abraha al-Asram. This would be the name by which he would be known when he later marched against the Kaaba. As blood poured from his wound and he collapsed to the ground, Iriad believed victory was his. The tyrant raised his arms in triumph, turning toward his forces in celebration. But in that moment of premature victory, fate intervened. Though wounded and bleeding, Abraha found the strength to rise. With Iriad's back turned, Abraha struck the killing blow. The tyrant fell, and with him, his reign of oppression ended. With Iriad's death, control of Yemen automatically passed to Abraha. The righteous general had become the new ruler of this distant Ethiopian province. But when news of this conflict reached the Najashi in distant Ethiopia, the king's reaction was one of fury and indignation. The Najashi was outraged that his two appointed leaders had turned their weapons against each other. In his anger, he made a solemn oath before God, for he was a Christian ruler, swearing that he would personally set foot on Yemeni soil and shave Abraha's head as a mark of ultimate humiliation. When word of this oath reached Abraha, fear gripped his heart. But Najashi's power was vast and distant, and Abraha knew his original intentions had been noble, to stop oppression, not to rebel against legitimate authority. In a gesture both clever and humble, Abraha devised a plan to release his king from his oath. He shaved his head completely, then gathered soil from Yemeni earth, placing both his hair and the sacred soil in a box. With utmost haste, he dispatched this package to Ethiopia. "O King Najashi," the letter read, the situation unfolded as follows. Uriad had become a tyrant and oppressor. Rather than see your forces destroy each other in prolonged warfare, I chose to settle the matter through single combat. I had no choice but to defend myself and ultimately kill him. I have never intended rebellion against your authority. Yemen remains your domain, and I remain your loyal servant." The letter continued with strategic brilliance. "To release you from your sacred oath, for you swore to set foot on Yemeni soil and shave my head. I have sent you this soil from Yemen. You need only step upon it, and your oath to walk on Yemeni earth will be fulfilled. My head is already shaved, completing the terms of your vow." The Najashi, apparently satisfied with this explanation and clever resolution, accepted both the soil and Abraha's submission. "Very well," he declared. "Yemen remains under my dominion, and the situation is now clear. Let the matter rest." But Abraha remained deeply troubled. In an age without modern communication, without the ability to hear one's voice across vast distances, to confirm intentions, he feared that Najashi's forces might still arrive unexpectedly from Africa to eliminate him as a potential threat. To demonstrate his unwavering loyalty to the Najashi, Abraha conceived of an ambitious project. He would construct a magnificent church, which he named Al-Kulles. The remnants of its walls can still be seen in Yemen today, testament to the grandeur of this ancient structure. This church, Al-Kulles, was built specifically to please the Najashi and prove Abraha's continued Christian devotion and political loyalty. In a letter to his distant king, Abraha wrote, "I shall build a church named Al-Kulles, and I shall make it so magnificent that all the people of the Arabian Peninsula will come to worship there in submission." The church was completed, and Abraha sent proclamations throughout the Arabian Peninsula. Every Arab tribe was commanded to come and worship at Al-Kulles. His intention was clear: to convert the Arabian peoples to Christianity through a combination of architectural magnificence and political pressure. When news of Al-Kulles reached the Arabian Peninsula, and when Abraha's demand that all Arabs abandon their traditional pilgrimage sites to worship at his church became known, it sparked outrage among a particular group in Mecca. These were the people known as Al-Nasi, literally the people of postponement. To understand who the Al-Nasi were, we must delve into the complex religious and social customs of pre-Islamic Arabia. The Arabs of this era lived in a constant state of tribal warfare, with different tribes raiding each other for livestock and wealth as a way of life. This was their tradition, their means of survival in the harsh desert environment. In the religious law inherited from Prophet Ibrahim, peace be upon him, as mentioned in Surah At-Tawbah, verse 36, there were 4 sacred months out of the 12 lunar months during which warfare was forbidden. These sacred months were Rajab, Dhul-Qa'dah, Dhul-Hijjah, and Muharram. The problem for the warring Arab tribes was that 3 of these months, Dhul-Qa'dah, Dhul-Hijjah, and Muharram, fell consecutively. This created an extended period of 3 continuous months, during which they could not engage in the warfare that sustained their economic system. To circumvent this religious restriction while maintaining the appearance of observance, they created an institution called al-Nasi, wise and respected men who were given the authority to manipulate the calendar. When they found themselves in Muharram and desired to wage war, these calendar keepers would simply declare, "We decide that this month is not Muharram, it is now Safar. Muharram will come next month." This manipulation of sacred time is referenced in the Quran, Surah At-Tawbah, verse 36. Indeed, the number of months with Allah is 12 lunar months in the register of Allah from the day He created the heavens and the earth. Of these, 4 are sacred. These are Muharram, Safar, Rabi al-Awwal, Jumada al-Ula, Jumada al-Akhira, Rajab, Shaban, Ramadan, Shawwal, Dhul-Qa'dah, and Dhul-Hijjah. Among these 12 months, 4 are sacred: Rajab, Dhul-Qa'dah, Dhul-Hijjah, and Muharram, during which warfare is forbidden. In the early period of Islam, this prohibition remained part of Islamic law until the revelation of the verse, "Fight the polytheists altogether as they fight you altogether." This later verse abrogated the restriction on warfare during the sacred months, though we can trace evidence of the original prohibition in the historical accounts of early Islamic military campaigns, where Quraysh leaders protested when Muslim forces engaged in operations during Dhul-Qa'dah. Allah also speaks directly about the al-Nasi in Surah At-Tawbah, verse 37. Indeed, the postponing of sacred months is an increase in disbelief, by which those who have disbelieved are led further astray. They make it lawful 1 year and unlawful another year to correspond to the number made unlawful by Allah, and thus make lawful what Allah has made unlawful. The evil of their deeds has been made pleasing to them, and Allah does not guide the disbelieving people. Having established who the al-Nasi were, we return to our central narrative. When Abraha constructed Al-Kulles and sent his proclamation demanding that all Arabs come to worship there, these same al-Nasi, despite their religious innovations, possessed one admirable quality: an absolute reverence for the Kaaba. The al-Nasi, though they had corrupted Allah's sacred calendar to enable their warfare, were prepared to die defending the honor of the Kaaba. When Abraha's letter reached them, one member of their group undertook a journey to Yemen with a singular, shocking purpose. This unnamed man from the al-Nasi traveled to Yemen, located the magnificent church of Al-Kulles, and committed an act of deliberate desecration. According to historical accounts, he defecated and urinated inside the sacred Christian structure, then smeared his waste across the walls of Abraha's pride and joy. After completing this act of religious vandalism, he returned to Mecca. When Abraha discovered what had been done to his church, his rage knew no bounds. "Who dared to defile my church?" Abraha demanded. The investigation revealed that the culprit was one of the al-Nasi, the people who postpone the sacred months. But Abraha, being from Africa and unfamiliar with Arabian religious customs, had never heard of this group or understood their beliefs. When Abraha inquired about these people and their origins, he was told they came from Mecca. "What is in Mecca?" he asked. "There is the Kaaba," came the reply. Though Abraha was a Christian and had never heard of the Kaaba, he pressed for more information. The Kaaba, his informants explained, is a house that is greatly revered by these people, especially by the al-Nasi. The reason this man came to defile your church is because you commanded his people to abandon their place of worship and come here instead. They already have their own sacred house that they worship. Upon hearing this explanation, Abraha made the fateful decision that would define his legacy and lead to one of the most extraordinary events in Arabian history. He would march against the Kaaba itself. This was the genesis of his infamous campaign, Abraha began assembling his forces for the march against Mecca. Being originally from Africa, where elephants were an integral part of military operations, Abraha had brought these magnificent creatures with him when crossing the Red Sea to Yemen. His army was, in essence, an elephant corps. These were not ordinary elephants, but war elephants, specially trained for combat, just as war horses differ from common horses. These elephants were conditioned to strike with their trunks, trample enemies underfoot, and follow complex battlefield commands. Some military historians note that just as war horses were sometimes equipped with iron headpieces and horn-like projections to become more effective weapons, these elephants' iron headpieces and horn-like projections to become more effective weapons, these elephants the pinnacle of ancient military technology. In any elephant herd, whether wild or domesticated, there is always a lead elephant that guides the others. Abraha possessed one such elephant, distinguished by its white coloring and exceptional leadership qualities. This elephant bore the name Mahmud, the same name that means praised or commendable in Arabic. Mahmud was not only the lead elephant, but also served as Abraha's mount, with the general riding alongside the elephant's handler. This arrangement demonstrated both the elephant's importance and Abraha's confidence in leading from the front. With his forces assembled and Mahmud at the head of the elephant corps, Abraha began his march toward Mecca. However, Abraha had never been to Mecca and had no clear knowledge of its location. The army had to make its way through unfamiliar terrain, guided only by general directions toward the sacred city. As news of Abraha's march spread throughout the Arabian Peninsula, it sparked reactions across the tribal landscape. Despite their various theological differences and idol-worshipping practices, virtually all Arab tribes held the Kaaba in reverence. They continued to perform pilgrimage and Umrah, maintaining the religious traditions of Prophet Ibrahim, even while incorporating polytheistic practices and using idols as intermediaries in their worship of Allah. Several Arab tribes attempted to intercept Abraha's advancing army. The first to challenge the Ethiopian force was led by a tribal chief named Abdul Mutalib. He emerged with his warriors and attempted to block the army's advance, but his forces were quickly overwhelmed. Abdul Mutalib himself was captured, bound, and forced to march with Abraha's army as a prisoner. A second attempt came from the tribe of Qatham, led by a chief named Nufail. Like Abdul Mutalib before him, Nufail and his forces were defeated and captured. Both of these tribal leaders were well respected throughout the Arabian Peninsula, and their defeat sent a clear message to other potential resistors. If these strong warriors could not stop Abraha, who could? Abraha's army continued its march until it reached the city of Taif, located approximately 60 kilometers from Mecca. The proximity to their ultimate destination filled the people of Taif with terror. Fearing that Abraha might attack their city as well, the leaders of Taif made a desperate bargain. "O King Abraha," the Taif delegation declared, "we do not quarrel with you. If you intend to march against the Kaaba and destroy Mecca, that is your affair. But please do not harm the city of Taif. As proof of our neutrality and goodwill, we will show you the exact location of Mecca and the Kaaba." An announcement was made throughout Taif. Who would volunteer to guide Abraha's army to Mecca? The response was silence. Every citizen of Taif understood that the Kaaba was the house of Allah, and despite their fear of Abraha's army, their conscience would not permit them to participate in its destruction. Every citizen, that is, except one. A man named Abu Rugal stepped forward and declared his willingness to serve as a guide. This decision would forever link his name with treachery and betrayal in Arab memory. Abu Rugal led Abraha's forces along the route to Mecca, and the army made steady progress toward their destination. When they reached the Great Gate of Mecca, known at that time as Bab Bani Shaybar, a remarkable event occurred. Abu Rugal, the guide who had led them this far, suddenly died at the very threshold of the sacred city. From that moment forward and continuing to this day, the name Abu Rugal became synonymous with treachery throughout the Arab world. When Arabs wish to call someone a traitor, they invoke the name Abu Rugal. His grave, located near where Abraha's forces had made camp, became a target for stones thrown by passing Arabs, a practice of rajm or stoning that expressed their contempt for his betrayal. With Abu Rugal dead and their guide lost, Abraha's army nevertheless established camp near the gates of Mecca. The ruler of Mecca at this time was Abdul Mutalib, grandfather of the future Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. As a psychological warfare tactic, Abraha ordered his soldiers to intimidate the people of Mecca by seizing their livestock that grazed near the city's outskirts. Among the animals taken were 200 camels belonging to Abdul Mutalib himself. Faced with this crisis, Abdul Mutalib consulted with the other leaders of Mecca. The consensus was unanimous and sobering. There was no possibility of military resistance against this elephant army. We have seen their strength and heard their war cries. We cannot match their power. The leaders requested that Abdul Mutalib attempt diplomatic negotiation with Abraha. However, this presented immediate challenges. Abraha, having only recently come to power in Yemen through his conflict with Riyadh and his subsequent church-building project, had not yet mastered the Arabic language. He spoke the languages of Africa, but required a translator to communicate with Arab delegations. Furthermore, Abraha was not receiving visitors, even if they claimed to be the king of Mecca himself. Recognizing this obstacle, Abdul Mutalib sought assistance from an unexpected source. Dhul Nafar, the Arab tribal chief who had been captured earlier during his failed attempt to stop Abraha's advance. How might I gain an audience with this king? Abdul Mutalib asked Dhul Nafar. I must speak with him. Dhul Nafar, recognizing Abdul Mutalib as the king of Mecca, replied, It seems quite difficult. However, during my journey from my tribal lands, from the time of my attack until arriving here in Mecca, I developed a friendship with a man named Unais. Unais is the handler of Mahmud, the lead elephant, and he holds a position of influence with Abraha. Perhaps I can persuade Unais to intercede on your behalf. The plan was set in motion. Dhul Nafar approached Unais, and after their conversation, Unais agreed to speak with Abraha about granting Abdul Mutalib an audience. Surprisingly, Abraha consented to the meeting. The encounter between Abdul Mutalib and Abraha took place within the Ethiopian general's tent. Abdul Mutalib was renowned throughout Arabia for his remarkable appearance and commanding presence. When he entered Abraha's tent, the Ethiopian king was so impressed by his bearing and dignity that he descended from his elevated seat and sat on the ground level with his visitor, an extraordinary mark of respect. With a translator facilitating their conversation, Abraha inquired about the purpose of the visit. Who are you? Abraha asked. I am Abdul Mutalib, leader of Mecca, came the reply. Why have you come to me? Abdul Mutalib's response surprised everyone present. O King Abraha, your forces have seized the livestock of my people, including 200 camels that belong to me personally. I request that you return all of these animals to their rightful owners. Abraha's reaction was immediate and intense anger. When you first arrived, he said through his translator, I observed your dignity and bearing. I was so impressed that I descended to sit beside you on the ground, treating you as an honored elder. I assumed you had come to request that I spare this sacred house from attack. Instead, you speak only of livestock and camels. Abdul Mutalib's response contained a profound theological insight that, had Abraha understood its implications, might have changed the course of events. O King Abraha, Abdul Mutalib said, I am indeed the owner of my camels, and my people are the owners of their livestock. But the house that you intend to attack, it has an owner, it has a lord, and that lord will protect it." Unfortunately, Abraha failed to grasp the deeper meaning of these words. He responded pragmatically, "Very well, I have no desire to harm you or your people. You are too small a force for me to consider as enemies. Here is my offer. Leave Mecca entirely, and I will only destroy that house. Do you agree?" "Agreed," replied Abdul Mutalib. All the seized livestock was returned to Abdul Mutalib and the people of Mecca. Upon returning to the city, Abdul Mutalib made a proclamation that would echo through history. For 3 days he announced, every single person in Mecca must evacuate the city completely. Not one soul was to remain within the city boundaries. The entire population moved to the mountains surrounding Mecca, from where they would be able to witness the events that were about to unfold. After the 3-day evacuation period, with Mecca now empty, Abraha ordered his army to advance into the city. The forces moved through the Great Gate and made their way through the streets toward the Kaaba. Mecca was a large city, so the Kaaba was not immediately visible from the entrance. When the army finally reached the vicinity of the sacred house and the Kaaba came into view, something extraordinary happened. Mahmud, the great white elephant who led the entire force, suddenly sat down and refused to move. The reason for this unexpected behavior involved Dhul Nafar, the captured Arab chieftain. At the moment when he first saw the Kaaba, Dhul Nafar managed to break free from his bonds. He ran toward Mahmud and grasped the elephant's ears, then called out in a loud voice, "O Mahmud, sit down. Sit. This is the house of Allah, the Most Exalted." He repeated his cry, "O Mahmud, sit down. This is the house of Allah, the Most Glorious." At that moment, Mahmud settled into a sitting position and refused to move forward. No amount of pushing, beating, or coercion could make the elephant advance toward the Kaaba. Remarkably, when the soldiers attempted to turn Mahmud toward Yemen, he would readily move. When they directed him back toward their camp, he would obey. But toward the Kaaba, he would not take a single step. Because Mahmud was the lead elephant, all the other elephants in the army followed his example and also refused to advance. The entire elephant corps had effectively mutinied against their master's orders. The situation became increasingly desperate for Abraha's forces. Some historical accounts describe how they resorted to stabbing Mahmud's hide with spears and daggers, drawing blood in their attempts to force him to stand and advance. But the great elephant would not be moved. It was in this moment of complete military stalemate that divine intervention manifested in a form that no human army could have anticipated or resisted. Witnesses on the surrounding mountains observed the sky growing dark, though not with ordinary clouds. The darkness was caused by an enormous flock of birds, so vast in number that they initially obscured the identity of what was approaching. Only when the flock drew closer did observers realize that these were indeed birds, and not ordinary birds, but the creatures that Allah Himself would name Arbabil in the Holy Quran. These birds carried with them stones from the fires of hell itself. According to various historical accounts, each stone was smaller than a date pit, seemingly insignificant projectiles. Each bird carried one stone in each talon and one in its beak, for a total of 3 stones per bird. When these stones were released and struck any member of Abraha's army, whether human or elephant, they would penetrate completely through the target's body, entering through the head and exiting through the stomach. These were not ordinary stones, but projectiles imbued with supernatural power, originating from the divine realm of punishment. The assault was comprehensive and devastating. Not a single member of Abraha's army survived, including Abraha himself. The entire force was annihilated in this unprecedented demonstration of divine protection for the sacred house. the destruction of the elephant army had immediate and lasting consequences for the people of Mecca and the broader Arabian Peninsula. The Ka'ba's sanctity was elevated to new heights in the minds of all who witnessed or heard about these events. The people of Mecca began using the destruction of the elephant army as a chronological reference point, similar to how other civilizations mark significant eras. They would say 1 year after the elephant, or 2 years after the elephant, or 5 days after the elephant, 10 days after the elephant. This became their standard method of dating events, and it was in this very year of the elephant that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was born. Allah commemorated these extraordinary events in the Holy Quran, in Surah Al-Fil, the chapter of the elephant. This is Surah number 105, verses 1 through 5. I seek refuge in Allah from Satan, the accursed. Have you not considered how your Lord dealt with the companions of the elephant? Did he not make their plan into misguidance? And he sent against them birds in flocks, striking them with stones of baked clay, and he made them like eaten straw. In this divine revelation, Allah addresses the people of Mecca directly. When the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, later called these same people to believe in his prophetic message, and they refused to accept his call to Islam, Allah reminded them of this very event. Do you not remember, Allah asks them, how your Lord dealt with the army of elephants? Did he not render their destructive plans completely futile? Did he not send against them flocks of birds carrying stones of punishment, reducing the mighty army to something as fragile and worthless as stalks devoured by locusts? This divine reminder served multiple purposes in the early Islamic message. It demonstrated Allah's power to protect his sacred house, his ability to render the mightiest earthly forces powerless, and his direct intervention in human affairs when his sovereignty is challenged. The story also carries profound theological implications about the nature of divine justice and protection. Abdul Mutalib's words to Abraha, "The house has an owner, and that owner will protect it," proved to be prophetic. The Ka'ba's protection came not through human military might, but through direct divine intervention that transcended all natural laws and expectations. Furthermore, the timing of these events, coinciding with the birth year of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, suggests divine preparation for the coming of the final prophetic message. The demonstration of Allah's power over those who would challenge his sacred house served as a precursor to the revelation that would transform not only Arabia, but ultimately much of the known world. The year of the elephant thus stands as a testament to several enduring truths: that human arrogance and military might are powerless against divine will, that the sacred house of Allah enjoys protection beyond human comprehension, and that historical events often serve as signs and preparation for greater divine purposes yet to unfold. The story of Abraha, from his righteous rebellion against tyranny to his ultimate destruction while attempting to challenge the house of Allah, remains one of history's most compelling demonstrations of how divine justice operates beyond human understanding, protecting the sacred through means that no earthly power can anticipate or resist.